All right, buckle up, everybody, because we're diving deep into a story that's got more twists and turns than, well, than a sheep trying to escape a shepherd. Family drama, ancient power struggles,
Yeah.
a little bit of divine intervention, all crammed into one chapter of Genesis.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, isn't it? I mean, how this story of Jacob and his father-in-law, Laban, it really touches on, so much more than just like family squabbles.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got inheritance and ambition and that whole complicated relationship between human choices and God's guidance.
Okay, so for anyone who might not have their Genesis notes handy, let's set the scene a bit. We're in chapter 31, and Jacob has been working for Laban for like 20 years.
Oh.
He marries his daughters, Rachel and Leah, and builds up, quite a bit of wealth and livestock. But things are getting a little tense.
Yeah, you can definitely feel that shift in the power dynamic as you read through those verses. Like Jacob's flocks, they're multiplying thanks in part to some divinely guided breeding techniques, which
Yeah, that's a whole...
that's a whole other conversation.
Oh, sure.
But this prosperity, it's not really sitting well with Laban's sons,
Jealousy rears its ugly head. Right. It makes you think about, like, the societal structures at play here. We're talking about a time when inheritance and those patriarchal blessings were everything, right?
Right.
So Laban's sons, they're seeing their potential future just slipping away, and that resentment, it's pretty palpable.
It is, absolutely. And it's not just the sons either. You start to see this change in Laban's attitude as well.
Right.
Like that warm welcome he gave Jacob 20 years ago, it's definitely cooled off quite a bit.
Right.
There's a sense of suspicion there, like a feeling that those family ties are, they're starting to fray a little bit.
And that's when God steps in with a cosmic course correction. Right. He tells Jacob, "Return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you." That's a pretty big moment, not just for Jacob, but for, his whole lineage.
Yeah, it's a recurring theme throughout Genesis, isn't it? This divine intervention.
Yeah.
This guiding hand that's shaping the destiny of nations, but it's not passive,
Right.
God's working in conjunction with human agency.
Yeah.
So Jacob, he has to choose to obey, to trust in that promise that God will be with him.
And that choice leads to one of the most dramatic escapes in biblical history. Jacob gets his wives and kids, all those sheep and goats, and just, makes a run for it under the cover of night, no less. But here's where it gets interesting. Rachel, before they take off, she decides to swipe her father's household idols.
Oh.
Talk about adding fuel to the fire.
It's a detail that sparked a lot of interpretations over the centuries. Why would Rachel risk so much to take those idols? Were they just, valuable possessions, or was there a deeper, maybe more symbolic meaning for her?
You have to wonder, right? I mean, these were teraphim, these household idols that were, they representing deities or ancestral spirits.
Right.
It wasn't just some knickknacks on a shelf. They had this spiritual significance, People thought they offered protection, fertility, maybe even a connection to the divine.
And some scholars suggest that Rachel, by taking these idols, she was maybe trying to secure some kind of spiritual insurance policy, for her and her family.
Oh, interesting.
Or maybe she was trying to weaken her father's spiritual authority somehow, strike a blow against that patriarchal system.
Yeah.
That she felt had wronged her.
It's almost as if she's trying to take some control in a situation where she's felt powerless, but stealing from your dad, even if you feel justified, it's a pretty bold move.
Yeah.
It speaks to a level of desperation or maybe even cunning that we haven't seen from Rachel before.
Right, and it just adds this whole new layer to her character, right? Like we tend to think of Rachel as the beloved wife, the one Jacob worked 14 years to marry. But this action, it reveals this fierceness, this willingness to take risks that, that challenges that simple image we have of her.
Yeah. Right. So now we've got a full-blown family feud on our hands. Laban, obviously furious, takes off after Jacob and his crew. They chase each other for 7 days. Talk about a tense road trip.
It is. But God, he makes his presence known again. He appears to Laban in a dream, warns him not to harm Jacob. It's a strong reminder that even in this chaotic situation, divine forces are working, guiding things towards some kind of resolution.
It's like that saying, man plans and God laughs, right? Laban might be, driven by anger and revenge, but he's ultimately going up against something much bigger than himself.
Right. And that divine intervention, it sets the stage for this confrontation that is, It's both emotionally charged and theologically significant.
Okay, but before we get into that confrontation, I'm curious about these idols. What did they actually represent in ancient Near Eastern cultures, and what might Rachel have been hoping to gain by taking them?
Well, it's complicated, and there's no, one definitive answer, but what we can say is that,
All right, so we've got Laban, he's chasing after Jacob, and God's told him not to do anything, to hurt him. I can only imagine how tense it must have been when they finally came face to face.
oh yeah, it's a confrontation that's just loaded with all this subtext. You've got accusations of theft and betrayal, years of resentment that are just bubbling to the surface. Laban, he's hurt, he's angry. He confronts Jacob for sneaking away and for not even saying a proper goodbye to his daughters and grandchildren.
You get the sense that it's not just about the stuff that was stolen, right? It
Right.
feels like there's like a deeper emotional wound there.
Exactly. And Jacob, in his defense, he points out Laban's own, manipulative behavior over the years. Remember, Laban changed Jacob's wages like 10 times.
Right.
He was exploiting his labor and devotion.
Yeah, it's like Laban's being forced to see his own flaws.
Yeah.
Talk about an awkward family reunion.
And it's in this really charged atmosphere that Rachel, she hides the idols that she stole.
Oh, wow.
She manages to keep Laban from finding what he's looking for. I mean, it makes you wonder what must have been going through her head at that moment.
Was she trying to protect her husband?
Right.
Or was it more like defying her father? Or was she clinging to these idols, like they were some source of power?
Right.
Like it's so hard to tell, what her motives were. It really shows how complex these characters are.
Yeah.
It's not so simple as good or evil.
It really underscores the difficult position that women were in this ancient society.
Yeah.
They were often seen as pawns in these power struggles.
Yeah.
But here's Rachel taking matters into her own hands. She shows this cunning and agency that really challenges that traditional way of thinking.
I love that. She's not just sitting back and letting things happen to her.
No.
She's making strategic decisions, taking risks, and really having an impact on how things play out.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we have, Jacob's speech. It's this really powerful rebuke of Laban's hypocrisy. He lists all the years he worked faithfully, all the hardships he endured, all the ways he was treated unfairly.
Right.
And throughout it all, he highlights how God was always protecting him and showing him favor.
It's a real turning point for Jacob, isn't it? He's not that timid young man anymore.
Right.
The one who ran from his brother Esau.
Yeah.
He's grown so much, become more confident, he understands his own worth and God's purpose for his life.
You can almost hear how this speech, echoes through the generations that come after him. It's like this declaration of independence, this bold statement of self-worth.
Right.
And it really shows how powerful faith and perseverance can be.
But then with all this anger and all these accusations flying around, the story takes this surprising turn towards reconciliation. Laban can't find the idols, and he's still thinking about God's warning. So he proposes this covenant with Jacob.
It's a big moment, not just for them personally, but for the future of the Israelites. They build a heap of stones to symbolize their agreement. It's like a boundary line that neither of them will cross in a hostile way.
I've always found the symbolism of the heap of stones so fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a simple thing, but it's so powerful. It's like this physical reminder of everything that's happened,
Yeah.
The conflicts, the peace that they've managed to reach. It's fragile,
It's a really powerful image. It speaks to this idea of covenant making, which was central to a lot of ancient Near Eastern cultures.
Yeah.
These agreements were often sealed with oaths and rituals,
Yeah.
and they were seen as binding, almost sacred.
So it's not just a casual agreement. It's like a serious vow before God.
Right.
They're acknowledging that their relationship is entering this new phase, one where they respect each other and won't aback each other.
Exactly. And it's interesting to think about how that ancient practice of making covenants, how it connects to the ways we try to resolve conflicts today.
Okay.
I mean, we still use treaties and agreements.
Yeah.
We still use symbolic gestures of reconciliation to try and fix broken relationships and create some kind of foundation for peace. It shows how, even though the world has changed so much, we still have that basic need for connection, for understanding each other.
Absolutely. And then after all the drama, we have that touching scene where Laban says goodbye and blesses his children and grandchildren.
It's a really poignant moment. It says a lot about how complicated family relationships can be.
You can feel that they really want to reconcile, to repair those bonds that have been strained.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, what happened to those stolen idols? Did Rachel ever give them back? Or did they cause more problems later on?
The text doesn't tell us, does it?
It doesn't.
It leaves it open to interpretation, you know? It invites us to think about all the possibilities and what they might reveal about Rachel and how these two families' relationship develop.
It's like this little puzzle that the story leaves us with, you know? It makes us want to dig deeper and explore all those layers of meaning. But before we go too far down that road, I think it's important to step back and think about the bigger picture. What does all of this tell us about, about God's role in history? What about the challenges of leadership and the lasting impact of family, both good and bad?
Well, one of the key takeaways for me is
It's amazing how many layers this story has.
Yeah.
We've got family drama, we've got divine intervention, questions about loyalty and ambition that are still relevant today, thousands of years later.
You know what strikes me is how this whole encounter, as personal as it is, it also sets the stage for the future nation of Israel. This covenant between Jacob and Laban, it's not just about, two guys and their families. It's like a symbolic separation between two lineages, almost like it's hinting at the separate path that Jacob and his descendants are going to take.
It's like a smaller version of that bigger story of the chosen people, isn't it?
Yeah.
God's working through people, through their choices, even their mistakes, to bring about his plan.
Exactly. And it makes us think about how our own lives, our own decisions, even the ones that seem small, might be part of something much bigger that we can't even see. It's kind of awe-inspiring,
Makes you wonder, what does it mean to live a life that's in line with God's purpose? Are we all just, stumbling around, or is there like a bigger plan?
Philosophers and theologians have been wrestling with that question forever, and I don't think there's a simple answer.
Right.
But what this story shows us is that even when we mess up, even when we're selfish or scared, God can use those experiences to shape us, to guide us towards a deeper understanding of ourselves and his purpose for us.
That's kind of comforting. The idea that even our mistakes can be redeemed, like there's a greater power at work making something good out of our not so great choices.
And it speaks to the power of forgiveness too, both from other people and from God. Laban, even though he was angry and hurt, he chooses to bless his family. And God, throughout all of this, he stays true to his promise to protect and guide Jacob.
It's a good reminder that reconciliation is always possible, that even the most broken relationships can be healed. But it's not always easy, is it?
No. It takes humility. It takes empathy. It takes a willingness to let go of those past hurts.
And sometimes it takes something tangible, like that heap of stones,
Right.
like a symbol of our commitment to peace.
I've always wondered about that last scene with Laban going back home and Jacob continuing on his journey. What were they thinking as they said goodbye? Did they ever see each other again?
I know, right?
The text doesn't say.
It doesn't.
It just leaves us with this sense of possibility. It lets us imagine what might have happened and maybe even reflect on our own experiences of saying goodbye.
Yeah, those moments when you have to part ways, knowing that life's going to take you in different directions, it's bittersweet. But there's also this feeling of hope, even though you're going your separate ways, those relationships, they still matter. They shape you. They remind you of how powerful love and connection really are.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the story of Jacob and Laban, I feel this sense of gratitude for these ancient texts, They don't give us easy answers, but they give us a way to understand how complex life is, how challenging faith can be, and how we're always searching for meaning in this world that can feel so unpredictable.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has.
Stolen blessings, multiplying flocks, daring escapes, tense confrontations.
Yeah.
This story has really taken us to the heart of what it means to be human, to deal with our imperfections, to try and reconcile, and ultimately to trust in something greater than ourselves.
And if there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from this, it's a renewed appreciation for the power of stories. How they can transport us to different times and places, how they connect us to what's deep within us, and how they inspire us to live lives that are full of meaning.
That's a great way to put it. And on that note, we say goodbye.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the incredible world of Genesis. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep searching for those hidden truths that are in every story.